Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. Thursday, the 24th is noon, and the S&P is actually has a little bit of juice to it today. It's been pretty dull the last really 2 weeks other than Monday. So we want to talk about this new squeeze setup we see, and I think most of you are going to say Tesla, and that's squeezing pretty good today. That's today's story. But I think the one that's going to come up is Wish. And what's interesting about Wish is a few things. Number one, it's a big Wall Street bets name. So you can see this is an interesting site, Swaggy Stocks. Don't know how many of you are familiar with that, but they essentially gauge the sentiment based on the number of comments, et cetera, posted on Wall Street Bets. And so you can see, interesting, the Tesla's number one right now, Clove, and then Wish is number three. And Tesla, we tweeted about this morning, with the stock around 680, we said this squeeze setup looks pretty good into tomorrow. So you kind of maybe missed that boat already, and we'll talk about Tesla at the end. But we're going to focus on Wish here, and we're going to explain why. So right now, the stock is at 1287. This morning, it was trading a little bit over 13. And so if we zoom in a little bit on this, you can see that the stock's had a really great run this week, no doubt. And what's interesting is 13 is the big number for this expiration. It's something like, if we go to the Equity Hub and you check out Wish, I believe it's 50% of Gamma expires tomorrow at the 13 strike. And so what we see here, and we did a little YouTube video about this, but we really kind of want to dig into it right now in the next few minutes, is that 50% of the Gamma expires tomorrow, that's 625 at the close. And so this is likely a pin here, right? Because every call that is over 13 is getting burned up right now. And based on things like Wall Street Bet sentiment, we know that it's probably a lot of long call buyers. So dealers are short calls. Those calls are all decaying. So they have a long stock hedge that they can unwind. And subsequently, what we're getting is the stock, if it pops over, pushes over 13, it's got this pressure, right? That's just going to keep kind of bringing it down. And it's likely going to pin that line. And unless a ton of new call options come in, this afternoon into tomorrow, this thing is likely not to move past 13. So you're saying, okay, Brent, great. You're talking about a move that hasn't happened yet. But what caught my eye and what we wanted to really show you guys was this. Most of the call open interest is now at 15. And the biggest delta expiration, which means the largest sort of in the money calls, don't expire until the July expiration. So it's likely that there's bigger players that are positioned out on July 16. And if you look at the July 16 expiration, you'll see there are 50,000 calls at the 15 strike, which means that if they can push this thing up, like say Monday and Tuesday when call buyers come into the market, they can get the squeeze going, that if you can get in the range of this 15 area, that's where you can get one of these slingshot type moves where this thing can really add up to a multiple of return. And I should also obviously preface that this is not investment advice. We don't suggest you guys go out and trade off of what we're saying here. This is just stuff for you to research on your own. But the point is that this is a really interesting setup. And if you look at the 5-day history of the stock, so this is the 18th, this was the big monthly expiration that just took place, you can see that the call buyers just exploded suddenly midweek. And then, these are huge call volumes. It's tailing off, right? And today is not a huge call volume day. The open interest is building, and with the Wall Street Bet sentiment, you kind of can combine all these things to note that if we can get, right, if there's like this turbocharger as we get towards 15, the general flow is Monday, Tuesday, people come in and buy calls, as we saw here, as we see repetitively with GameStop and AMC. They come in and buy calls, and then by Thursday, Friday, those calls start to decay, right, because they're expiring, or most of those calls expire on Friday. And so on Monday and Tuesday, if you can gas this thing again, because the bulk of these 15 calls are longer dated options, that decay doesn't hit them as much, right? And so those could really grab on, and rather than the stock sort of fading off of a squeeze, might hold up a little bit better because these positions don't expire until July. So that is really the interesting squeeze candidate that we want to talk about. We've seen this set up before a few times in which this open interest really expands. And then if you want to look for a gamma squeeze, you need to have that call volume come in. That's really important. But if you can have those positions overhead that kind of can grab the stock and hold it, right? Provide some support, a platform overhead for the squeeze to have, some new fuel, then that staging can hold up, right? Because, for example, in AMC, 60, there's no big positions over 60, and so there's nothing to really hold that stock up. For today, there's not enough call interest expiring at 14 or above really in in Wish to kind of keep this thing fueled up and keep going, right? And implied vol gets a little bit high, and so the stock really is just going to have this decay happen. So this is a really interesting setup, we think, for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and something to really keep an eye on that we wanted to flag for all you guys as we talk here. And then the other name that a lot of people are talking about is Tesla. I'm going to first take a couple quick questions on Wish if anyone has anything there. Hey Dave, what's up, man? Nelson, how you doing? So there we go with Wish, and then let's just pop over quickly to talk about Tesla. Tesla is the name that kind of already squeezed, and it'll help you sort of identify what could take place in Wish, we think, kind of coming up, and some of the signals we found. If we look at Tesla on the real-time indicator, this is our hero indicator, which shows the real-time options flow in Tesla. In other words, what you're seeing here on the bottom is if this indicator is positive, you're getting long calls or short puts that come into the market. And this is bullish flow flowing into Tesla. And around 680, the stock was this morning, we flagged that there was so much open interest built up for tomorrow at 700. And the volume today was overwhelmingly large. I think by something like 10 in the morning, we already had something like 40 or 50,000 contracts traded at the 700 strike. So you can combine all of these elements. The fuel is there. There's already large open interest at 700. It is the strike with the largest number of call options. This is the 700 strike. Apologies there. I think we had an audio issue. I've been rambling on here. Sorry. So the issue with Tesla is, you can see that as the stock is squeezing higher, again, we around 680, we pointed out the fact that there was humongous open interest at 700. So 700 actually is the strike that has the largest number of calls open. And so what happens is, as the stock squeezes higher, there's this open interest at 700 that's like a magnet that can pull the stock higher, right? So that's that overhead staging that we're talking about. This is sort of akin to the 15 strike in Wish, in that there's something overhead that can grab onto the stock and help pull it higher in terms of gamma. So again, if you're looking at this hero indicator, this is long calls or short puts is what this bullish options flow is. This is the real-time options flow in Tesla for today. That is bullish. You have huge open interest at 700. You know that the volume for tomorrow's expiration, the 700 call, is very large. At a very early hour this morning, around 10 o'clock, I believe there was already 40 or 50,000 calls that I had traded. And so you can see that all the fuel, the pieces the pieces were laid out right for that squeeze to happen. And so when you take that into context of the Wish setup, you can see these pieces that we're trying to put together, right? Large call volume, large overhead open interest, such that there's something for, again, the stock to grab onto from a gamma perspective. There's that hedged fuel as the name goes up. And then, of course, as we enter tomorrow, we're likely to see in Tesla, as we are seeing with Wish now, that the call decay kicks in, and that's where the pin effect kind of comes around these large gamma strikes. So those are Wish is the setup that we wanted to flag everyone for, starting off with really next week, again, because that options decay. Tesla is the trade that's happening today into tomorrow that we wanted to flag as an example, as a this morning was just a prime setup for Tesla to take place. We suggested some trades to look at, possibly, or something like a call fly, which is interesting, where you maybe get long like the 680s and you sell a couple of the 700 strike calls if you want to try to play that pin. That's kind of an interesting strategy to look at. But there's a lot of different trades you can structure if you know sort of, okay, there's a gamma fuel here, there's a spot to pin. I have a very defined short-term date, like tomorrow, the expiration tomorrow is so big. So these are the variables you can kind of put together to identify some of these squeezes. And again, Wish, we think, is really going to come into play, we think, on Monday. So we'll give a few minutes. We didn't want to take too much of everyone's time today in the middle of the day. Again, Wish and Tesla were the two we wanted to cover. I'll help answer a few questions now if you guys have any. Yeah, Eugene mentioned this broken wing butterfly idea. So the general trade idea in this case is I want to get long the stock, right, in Tesla. So the trade's around 800, with the stock around 680 in Tesla, you want to get long the stock, and the call options are very expensive. So, a pure call option is obviously one of the most, it's a higher risk reward bet, but if you can structure it to pay off some of your, use a higher strike, right, to pay off some of the cost of that at the money call, then for me, it became interesting, right? So if you look at the 680 call, I think it was around $7, and then the 700 strike calls at the time were roughly around $350. So if you bought one 680 and you sold two of the 700s, then you're kind of paying for that cost, right? And the interesting thing there is that if Tesla goes to 700 and pins 700, you are maximizing the amount of money you can make on that trade. Now, obviously, you'd probably also want to buy some type of higher strike call, an out of the money call, just to protect yourself if Tesla goes up another 15 or 20% from here, right? You want to cover your wings, so to speak, which is why it's a butterfly trade. So it's basically just that call ratio that's so interesting, because you can sort of play that space, right? You can play this $20 move, the 680 to 700, and that 700 pin. You can kind of get those. You can kind of get those to combine. So that was the interesting trade, the broken wing butterfly that we suggested this morning, because it really actually could do that trade for a credit, depending on the out of the money call that you selected as your long. So that was the broken wing butterfly setup that we were looking at. Yeah, Bernard, good question on the AMC. We weren't going to dig too much into AMC. And AMC was interesting. I think we were originally talking about it was around 55 or so, and you could see a few things that come into place with AMC is that there was so much gamma in the name yesterday at 60, and the calls were streaming in, and the flow was just very bullish. And then you had this, what could be a kicker, right? And we still don't know because the Russell rebalances tomorrow, in that if indexers had to start buying this stock, that's this extra flow that's coming into the name that could just add on top of the squeeze, right? And that was sort of the extra variable, something of an unknown variable that could have really sparked this thing to shoot much higher. It continues to struggle with 60. Options buyers have just really faded in this thing in the last few days. And if you look at that, swaggy stocks sentiment chart, AMC doesn't really appear in there. It really has drifted, quite a bit down. So rather than being one of the top two names that everyone cares about, now it's like number 3 or number 4. And as it gets expensive, both in terms of, the stock price is a little bit higher and vol gets higher, there seems to be a little less play in there. And so, as much as these Wall Street bets people want to kind of dig in on a name like GameStop or AMC, they want to make money, right? And you want to go and chase the sort of the high flying name. And so what's interesting, like GameStop, the stock has held its price. It's at $300 a share, right? Or $200 a share, excuse me. But it's kind of, in a way, I don't want to say dead money. It's just not moving, like some of the convex returns we've seen in, Wish and even, Tesla today is a little bit more interesting. So AMC, really, that was the major setup we saw was, again, the Russell rebalance and those calls building. Those calls have stopped building up, and that fuel's really been lost. And 60 is the big kind of cap level that we're looking at for tomorrow, unless this Russell rebalance flow is quite big. Yeah, Ian, Casey, Douglas, we are working on the ability to sort of sort out and find what we're calling our sandbox, which are the most interesting names to play. He asked if we have a if we're focusing on or building a set of names for traders to pay attention to based on these option setups, and the answer is 100%. And we are sketching that out now and building that out, and that's going to be called our sandbox, which is a filter of the most interesting names to play from an options perspective. We had one more question for Clovis, and I'll just show that one because it is number 2 on the Swaggy Stocks list there. Swaggy Stocks is too funny. Clovis, right now is around 14. That's the big gamma area. There's so much gamma, again, expiring in this name tomorrow, 45, 50%, that, this thing, again, needs more call buyers to come in order to juice this thing higher. So 14 looks like probably the pin area. And I think a lot of times it's interesting to play these gamma pin ranges because you get paid a lot. The implied vol is so high, and the decay doesn't really kick in until you get closer to expiration because a lot of people are concerned these things could suddenly rip. This Clovis call volume is very large. I don't know what the volume is yet today. You can see this gap up in volume, which is what helps juice this thing. But even though we had 600,000 calls trade yesterday, the key gamma strike did bump up to 14, but there's a whole bunch of open interest at 15. So we think that would probably be the largest. So, certainly I don't know, again, what the options prices are at the moment, but we just don't see this thing moving a whole lot more past, 14, 15, particularly as this decay comes in. Obviously 15 as a percentage basis is quite a bit higher from here, but the stock already almost was at, 15 this morning. So very tough for these names to squeeze as they have so much gamma tied to tomorrow's expiration, and we're only a day away from that expiration, that call decay, right? Charm, people like to call it. Dealers unwind their long deltas as they get closer to expiration. Those factors really kick in on these names that are the meme names that have those big weekly call options positions. So great. So we're going to leave it there. We're going to keep this one nice and short. If you guys have any questions, guys and girls, of course, pop the questions in the description or the comments, and we're happy to answer those questions as we post this video up. You can also send us a note on Twitter at SpotGamma or info@spotgamma.com. Appreciate everyone's time. Hope this was helpful. Good luck trading. See ya.